So our comparisons today are going to be two horizontal row movements that are about as different in stimulus and intent as you can get, which makes them awesome to compare. So first is going to be the barbell bent over row. Pretty standard for most programs. A lot of people would be familiar with at least the idea behind a barbell bent over row. The second is going to be an inverted row. So an inverted row can be done on a barbell, can be done on TRX straps, it can be done on any kind of alternative bar as well, but the premise is going to be pretty much the same. Barbell bent over row, you're supporting your load plus the external load with your low back, with your posterior chain. You're trying to keep that momentum minimized and you're performing the row against gravity. The inverted row, you're going to be suspending yourself under the bar, the TRX strap, and you're going to be using your body weight as the external load that you're rowing against. So with the barbell bent over row, here, the limiting factor for most people is going to be their low back strength and endurance. One of the big reasons why I'm not a huge fan of performing this movement for 99% of people that I work with is just because the risk is not generally worth the reward. It's going to be somewhat injurious. A lot of people are going to struggle to maintain positioning, and even more people are going to let their ego override the stimulus, and they're going to try and use a lot of momentum. They're going to try and invert their torso. They're going to try and stand almost upright with it to where it's much less of a bent over row. It's much more of like an upright row. So it kind of loses its effectiveness. But the proper bent over row is a super effective movement, especially for creating posterior chain strength. So through your erectors, your traps, your lats, and even your glutes and hamstrings, while the inverted row is going to completely circumvent all of those low back rigidity, strength, endurance problems, because now you're no longer supporting your body weight in that external load. You're suspended and you're rowing your body weight into the bar or the TRX strap. So very different movements again, but they are targeting very similar muscle groups. So with the bent over row, you're getting mostly rhomboids, low traps, rear delts even, some lats, a lot of erectors just from them trying to maintain their positioning. But a lot of people try and turn the barbell bent over row into a lat movement. It's not the best lat movement in the world. It's much more of a full posterior chain movement. That's kind of how I like to think about it, because the idea is to go heavy, the idea is to move a lot of weight with perfect form, and again, maintain that positioning throughout. Inverted rows, on the other hand, are going to be a lot of similar structural muscle groups that we're targeting there, but we're removing the erectors, and it's more of an isolated back, rear delt, mid-low trap, rhomboid, again, lat movement without the hamstrings, the glutes, the abs, the erectors kicking in to stabilize. So for the barbell bent over row, I typically like to take it out of a rack, but you can also pick it up from the floor like a deadlift. You want to start the movement as if you were performing a conventional deadlift or even an RDL. So hips back here. You want to get your torso angle to about 30 degrees compared to the floor, and then you want to lock that in and keep that tension in your hamstrings and glutes rather than your low back if possible. So you want to keep that tension and load back, and then you're rowing into your upper abdomen. But you're not doing this, which is what a lot of people do. Important note there, these should be very strict, which is typically why I like and prefer Pendley rows. But now moving into the inverted row, using TRX straps here, you can also use a barbell, just really depends on your preferences, but also the equipment availability you have. The idea here is that you allow yourself to suspend under the strap or bar, and then you're pulling yourself up to meet it. So, one thing I really love about the inverted row in particular is the risk profile here. So, you're not going to get hurt performing an inverted row. Barbell bent over row, on the other hand, a lot of people are going to have issues with that movement. Even if they're perfectly healthy, it's just a complicated movement. A lot of things going on. If I'm choosing for the majority of my clients, probably going to go with an inverted row, but it is important to note that the stimulus here is so different comparing these two movements that they're not really interchangeable. So that is a very important thing to understand and differentiate between them. A barbell bent over row is much more comparable to a deadlift, where a inverted row is much more comparable to something like a chest supported or seal row. So again, horizontal rows with vastly different use cases on separate ends of the spectrum for what a horizontal row can be, both applicable potentially in programmings. Bent over row, more strength oriented. Inverted row, more hypertrophy and mobility oriented, but understanding both use cases is a really great way of continuing to make progress and increase the muscularity and strength of that posterior chain.